Cheers, guys. Epix911, welcome to the Elitist Geek and an action-packed Monday. Kind of crappy. Those weekends go just way too quick, don't they? But like I say, action-packed Monday, a lot of virtual reality news coming at us from all directions, a lot of it from E3, and a lot of it from outside of E3 as companies use E3 kind of to piggyback their own marketing off of. Some kind of questionable things coming out of E3, but we'll get into that. Like I said, some really exciting stuff as well. So, Aisha Tyler hosting E3 that I watched anyways on YouTube earlier today. She's probably one of my favorite voice actors from Archer. If you haven't seen Archer, complete aside, gaming aside, do yourself a favor and watch it now. It's witty, timely, adult cartoon humor. And as far as Western animation goes, considering most adult animation seems to be anime nowadays, it's refreshing to see something come out of the West that's equally entertaining. But enough of that. And as far as I have been able to tell, she's a gamer, which is a good thing. I always find it weird when they get hosts for these things, and you can just so tell they're not really gamers. But neither here nor there. Let's dive into it. Now, I'm going to talk about UBISoft here. Did anybody catch that opener? Was that not embarrassing? There's few things that embarrass me. That was one of those things where it was just weird. It was almost creepy, strange. Not quite sure what UBISoft was trying to do there, but at the beginning, they kind of went through some strange dance interpretive zoo animal thing with giraffes, and honestly I don't know what the hell they were doing, but it was bizarro world. It was really, really strange. And then they kind of launched into some other stuff. There were a few things. You know what, we'll get into the UBISoft one in a little bit, but let's just talk about some gaming news in general. Some of it's going to be from E3, like I said, and some of it's kind of just piggybacking off of E3, but definitely want to get that out there and mention it. So there's a Matrix-inspired game called SuperHot, and what's interesting about this is all their marketing makes specific emphasis on using the Oculus Touch. And hey, I think that's a good thing, because you want to start hitting that critical mass now, because, and I mentioned this in a previous video, there's a real danger for Oculus where devs are programming for the Xbox controller. And let's face it, the Xbox controller is not an old gamepad to program for. It's a Xbox One controller. It's not a very difficult thing to program for. In fact, it would be the path of least resistance if you were doing VR programming, creating a quick and dirty game, specifically a seated VR experience. It would be very easy and tempting to just program for the gamepad. And I think there's a real danger. So I do like to see marketing initiatives start to get that out, in the mainstream. The more they can mention Oculus Touch, keep it relevant, especially against the onslaught from Vive. And like I said, I've only been able to compare it to Vive. I cannot wait to get my Rift. I'm really super stoked about it. And, Oculus Touch, day one purchase for me as well. But this SuperHot game looks really Matrix inspired. It plays around with time travel. And I noticed a really common thing today, because I was watching a lot of this E3 with coworkers. And these coworkers do not have VR. They have not tried VR. And they're very cynical and skeptical about VR. And remember in a few videos back, if anybody's watched that video, I said the key is marketing virtual reality, because I have not had anyone, and a lot of your comments have seconded that and echoed that, I have not seen anyone yet who was disappointed with virtual reality. And what I mean by that is anybody who isn't really a gamer, like if I, and I should qualify that, my wife is into gaming, but it's more MMO stuff like World of Warcraft. there was really no hype one way or the other for her. As soon as she tried the Vive, she was blown away. She hadn't kind of preformed any expectations, right? So that's kind of one end of the spectrum. Then you're going to have the people who are really into gaming and are looking forward to it. Virtual reality, they've been waiting for it for a long time. I would put myself in that category. There was no way I was going to be disappointed. Like, it would have had to be so bad because this is something I've wanted for so long, right? You've got a third type of gamer, and that's the skeptic. And that's why marketing for this is so damn important. And I think so many of these companies are completely missing the boat on marketing. Case in point, at E3, and let me know if you guys agree with this, because this was just my observation. Everything they showed, it was blatantly obvious that the poly counts weren't as high in the VR games. It was blatantly obvious that the textures were downgraded from what you'd expect to find in, hell, even an indie game, right? And the gameplay looked very simplistic. Now, for those of us who already have virtual reality, whether that's the Rift or the Vive, we know the experience transcends simply looking at a screenshot or, hell, a video, because it's the immersion that you feel when you put that HMD on your head, right? But remember, they're not just marketing to people like us or the people who have no expectations. They're marketing to these skeptics, right? And the comments, seriously, from my coworkers, wow, crappy game, yeah, that held my interest for all of about 10 seconds. They were just turning away. They were turning away from the multiplayer game that they showed where Lucky Palmer came out, and honestly, I don't even remember. It was in Paris, and they were doing some kind of capture the flag. If you just looked at that for what it was as a 2D game, you saw a super simple game that's been done 100 times before that looked like an indie effort, right? And again, that's where the marketing has to be in your face, literally. They got to get out there. They got to get to shopping malls, schools, whatever the hell they got to do. They have to get these skeptics to try it, right? And it's just not effective for those people, the way they're going about it. So anyways, interested in knowing what your thoughts are, but to a game, all of those VR games, and there's one exception that I want to talk about in a little bit, were super disappointing superficially, right? Just looking at them aesthetically, super disappointing. And like I said, these skeptics were turning away, right? So there was SuperHot, Killing Floor Incursion, same thing. Survival horror, VR game. But it honestly looked like a game from, 5 to 10 years ago in terms of poly count, in terms of texture. And the reason for that is because some people might be watching, well, okay, you've said that's because they're VR games. Does that mean they're going to have low poly counts? The most important thing for virtual reality is hitting 90 frames per second. 45 is a distant second. You want to try to nail 90 frames per second because a lot of things happen at 90 frames per second. Like immersion ratchets up, right? It helps almost, well, I will say it reduces nausea and motion sickness a lot. Yeah, there's still people who are going to get it depending on the type of experience, but 90 frames per second is kind of that magical holy grail. And you can see what they're doing with these games. The reason the textures and the poly counts are a lot lower is because they're hitting that 90 frames per second. They know it's about putting this on your head. And really, that's fine. Marketing to us who already have them. We know that. We know that the higher texture games are going to come as the technology is adopted, as we start to see things like VRWorks and AMD's equivalent find their way into gaming engines and libraries, right? We're not there yet. So I know that, you know that, but a lot of these people don't know that, right? Serious Sam, again, kind of been there, done that. I'm still going to try a lot of these things, right? And you guys have been terrific. I've got a list, I kid you not, that's probably 30 deep now of things to try, mostly games, and that's great. So I literally have my work cut out for me trying this stuff out, and I'm trying my best to catch up. So Killing Floor, Incursion, and then we had a clip where we had Carmack showing off Minecrift. Now, I probably would have been more impressed had I not already tried Minecrift. Minecrift is the HTC Vive free, third-party kind of hacked or modded VR support for the Vive. And it's fantastic. It's intuitive, it's user-friendly, and quite frankly, when I was looking at Carmack play, I was thinking, wow, what is taking you so long, Carmack? Like, this guy's a genius, right? He's very eccentric, but if you know what he's capable of coding-wise, if you speak that lingo, he's kind of off in his own world, right? And you almost wonder, what do they have this guy doing? Like, they've locked him up in the lab, and he's kind of doing special projects, and I know he's had a lot of the phone stuff, right? The phone VR's kind of been his pet project, but what I'm concerned about is when I see something already released, that seems miles beyond this version that they're working on. So am I missing something, guys? Like, is there something special about this Minecrift version that Minecrift that I've been playing doesn't have? Let me know, because from what I could see, not so much. Then there was a clip of the Star Trek bridge crew, and I may split this into a couple of videos because there's a lot of content here, so I'm going to try to get through it here. But the Star Trek bridge crew with LeVar Burton, again, the low poly counts. The comment from these skeptics was, wow, that looks like 12 years ago. Just not getting it, right? Just not getting it. But at least we got to see a bit more of the immersion aspect. Them trying to sell the experience, not the graphics, right? More the experience of the game. And I thought LeVar did a pretty decent job when you compare it to some of the hacks that were on that stage. Wow, like that was just really troubling. The marketing was just not coming across. But I thought LeVar, for what he was given to work with, did an admirable job of kind of selling the bridge experience by, simply put, he was talking about, when you're on set as an actor, it was complete make-believe. None of the stuff did anything. When they set a course, Warp Factor 5, they were just playing with play screens. Whereas he says now, it's like you're on the bridge, and that's selling the experience of VR way more than showing some static, horribly low poly, horrible texture VR games out of context of the experience, right? So that Star Trek bridge crew, that one looks interesting, right? But again, I can't help but think we're still in that first early adopter phase. A lot of this is tech demo-ish. For sure, there's lots of games, right, that are full experiences. And I don't mean to diminish that. What I mean to say is we just haven't begun to even crack kind of the, Pandora's box of what VR is capable of. And we're really going to see that ramp up throughout the year. There was also an announcement for Eve Valyrie. For anybody who has the game, I don't know if it's an upgrade or kind of like the equivalent of DLC, but it's called Carrier Assault, and that looked great. I tried to get that working with, I think it was Vorpx, but never did have any luck on the Vive. I know the Vive version is coming at the end of the year, so I'm just going to wait for that. And then, of course, when my Rift arrives, it'll be probably a day one Rift purchase for me. So those were a lot of the games that they showed, but the really cool announcement for me, guys, was Fallout 4. And when I talk about us as early adopters having to wait, that's a case in point. June 2017 is their expected launch date. And no, it didn't look terribly special in terms of what they showed. It was basically the game that was released the past year, Fallout 4. But what you got to remember is Fallout 4 from Bethesda is so mod friendly, right? All the tools that are going to be available for that VR version. And I've got a treat for you because you can actually play Fallout 4 if you've got a Rift or a Vive right now. And I'll get into that, how you can do that, a little bit later in the video. But yeah, so Eve Valyrie, this Carrier Assault is coming out, and Fallout 4 honestly looks really, really like it'll be a cool experience. I don't know yet from what they've showed if it's going to be a seated experience where you're kind of teleporting yourself around, or if it's going to have some room VR capability. But the other way that I'm going to talk about playing Fallout 4 does support room VR on the Vive. We also finally, this one's a doozy here, guys, so I'm going to have a schlock of beer for this one. We finally get Microsoft's entry into virtual reality. We knew it was coming. We didn't know how, we didn't know when. Well, maybe some of us did who had inside knowledge. I certainly didn't. And now we know. And it's none other than Project Scorpio. You gotta love the names these guys come up with, eh? Project Scorpio, which is coming to Xbox. No time frame yet, no firm time frame. But they promise high fidelity 4K. Here's where I get concerned. With absolutely no understanding, or really they didn't show any specs, so we don't know. Is it a 1080p lens? Are they talking 4K downsampled to 1080p like we currently have? We need more details on that, and as that becomes available, I'll let you guys know. But that's saying a lot, because we're not at that point yet where 4K is, would I say, is it close to becoming a reality? Yeah, close as in hand grenades and horseshoes, but close as in with the next few months? No. This is still years away, but possibly next year, towards the end of that, I can kind of see that becoming closer and closer to being a reality, especially as the AMD and NVIDIA VR-specific code and technical features get used on the video cards that are coming out from AMD and NVIDIA. Once they start being able to take advantage of things like stereo rendering, the SLI and the Crossfire for VR, yeah, we're going to be closer. But as things stand right now, even a 1080 card isn't able to do 4K gaming with all graphic options turned off in non-VR, just regularly. So to be able to say that you're going to do that in VR, which has steeper requirements, for that magical frame rate number, that's a tall order. Is it marketing hype? Well, we'll find out, right? And of course, like I said, it's an AMD card, and you have to wonder how AMD would be doing if they weren't in bed with both of the consoles, right? Sony and Microsoft. And I think that's a good position for them to be in, because they provide the competition to NVIDIA, and let's face it, it keeps the revenue stream, which is so important for R&D. So super looking forward to where we're going to go with all of that, and I can't wait to see cards like the 480, what they're capable of once people start taking advantage of the stuff, the hardware, through software. Alienware featured a backpack PC, which I thought was pretty cool. Again, using the aforementioned RX 480 from AMD. That is very similar to the Sega VR that I was talking about the other, I think it was my last video, which is going to have the warehouse scale VR. So that is super cool, how they're going to pull that off, because you're putting everything literally in a backpack. I mean, the day will come when it's wireless, but bandwidth-wise, we're just not there yet. So the backpack is a good intermediate step to free us up from that. The tether, kind of like an umbilical cord, right? Keeps us locked in, unfortunately, and prevents that awesome full-scale immersion. Now, here's what I wanted to get to, and I'm going to try to keep this within a couple of minutes. And I really appreciate you guys dropping, leads to not just news stuff, but for me, games. Like I said, I've got a massive list of games, but you guys are also great for utilities. I didn't know about Vireio, and it's Vireio, and if I'm butchering that pronunciation, I apologize, but Vireio is an alternative to Vorpx. And as of their latest release, which is version 4.0 Alpha 2, they support the Vive. And what's really cool about that, remember at the beginning of the video, I talked about Fallout 4 having to wait till next year? Well, no, you don't. If you have a Vive, using Room VR, Fallout 4 is supported now. Have I got it working? Not yet. I've been tinkering, but I've been hard-pressed to find Fallout 4 specific instructions for setting up a Vive with Vireio. And so it's been kind of me tinkering or just completely oblivious. If they're out there and you guys know, can you point me to link of instructions? That would be great. But I'm close to cracking it. I got it working in Skyrim, and I gotta say, just so far, a way better implementation than Vorpx. But I think it's one of those tools that you could happily use alongside Vorpx. The more ammo, the better, right? Like, we've just got all kinds of ways to experience VR. But I have to stress, and I've stressed this before, this isn't built from the ground up VR. We're taking games that are stereo, 3D capable and bending them to the software's will to project on an HMD. So results are going to vary. Menus that were never designed for virtual reality may be challenging, and the software guys, both for Vorpx and for Vireio, are figuring out ways to kind of get around that. I know in Skyrim I've been able to go into cinema mode for inventory and then pop back in, and there's all kinds of keyboard shortcuts for things. It's only going to get better, right? But I just thought I'd throw that out there for anybody who didn't know. I just thought that was so cool. If you like Fallout 4 like I do, and you want to try it with Room VR, and this is a first, because Vorpx doesn't support Room VR, and no other game supports Room VR. So for the third party, this is really cool. As soon as I get that working, I'll have more details to post up. So there you have it. I will have timelines for all these stories in the description below, as well as links to the sources so you guys can dig a little further. If there's anything you want specific information about, just ask me in the comments below. Anything that I missed, I'll add it on to a future video. Trust me, I could have doubled up on this video, but I want to cut it short because we're already running pretty long. As always, guys, till the next one, cheers.